Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's press conference. We're really glad you could join us, and I hope everyone is doing well. Thanks also to everyone who's tuning in via our YouTube channel today. I'd like to start by introducing our speakers for today. I'm very pleased to welcome Johan Lindgren, the CEO of Easyjet, and as of today, the newly elected 2021 chair of A4E. Johan will be followed by Benjamin Smith, Ben, of course, our 2020 chair, and I'm really pleased that we're able to have both Ben and Johan with us for today's press conference. I'm also pleased to welcome Carlos Munoz, the founder and CEO of Volotea, and as also Marco Čumperlik, the CEO of TUI Airlines. So welcome to everyone. Before we begin, just the usual housekeeping rules. If you would please write your questions via the Q&A and not in the chat, that would be very welcome. So questions via the Q&A. We will have a short presentation and we will be taking your questions towards the end of the event. So please feel free to ask your questions, and we'll get to as many of those as we can towards the end of the slides. And we will have a press release coming out shortly, so just look for that in your inbox this afternoon. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Johan to get us started, please. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Jennifer, and thanks everybody for joining us here today. And this press conference is following also some events that we've had at A4E. This morning we had steering committee meetings, we've had a general meeting as well, and we also met with the Commissioner Valion as well, which has been very, very helpful in the roadmap that we have around the issues that comes onto the topics we're going to discuss later on in this press conference today. So I'm going to kick this off and start talking about really the impact that we have seen from the consequences of the restrictions that's been put in place by governments following the pandemic and COVID-19. So last year has really been unlike anything else that we've seen, and obviously this comes also, of course, for when we were looking at aviation. The restrictions that's been put in place have really devastated flight connectivity in Europe. And before COVID, around 160 short and medium routes had 12 or more flights per day, as you'll see on the left side of the screen. Today, the matter of truth is that there's only a handful of routes who have 12 flights a day or more. And this adds up to some 6 million flights which are missing, or about 1 billion passengers who would have traveled around Europe in the last year. So moving on to the next slide. But it is also very clear now that the crisis is still not over, with case numbers currently increasing in a number of countries. But there are some good news on this. And compared to where we were only a few months ago, today we now have a path towards recovery. The vaccination programs underway will further reduce risks from COVID and give passengers additional confidence in the coming months. Airlines are ready to deliver safe travel, but we need governments to work with us to make this happen in a safe and a harmonized way. It's vital that Europe sets out a roadmap to restore freedom of movement for its citizens, including plans for the lifting of national travel restrictions so that aviation can support Europe's economic recovery from the crisis. Our objective must be unrestricted travel where it is safe to do so, but we must ensure that there's a clear framework in place across Europe to deliver this, and we currently are not getting this. Finally, we also have a chance to restart in a sustainable way. Our recently launched Destination 2050 Net Zero Roadmap shows A4E carrier sustainability commitments remain strong despite the crisis. But the reality is that the longer we remain grounded as a sector, the harder it will become to make these investments. We urge EU leaders to work closely with us to help us deliver on these commitments and to restart not only in a safe but also sustainable way. And with that, I'm handing over to Ben.
Okay, thanks, Johan. Thanks, Jennifer. And welcome to all of the members of the press. Is the sound okay there, Jennifer? Because I just switched devices.
Great, loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. So just following off what Johan has just mentioned, maybe to go in a little bit more detail about the travel restrictions and how important it is for our industry that they be coordinated. We do want to restart by summer. Our customers, it's clear, do want to travel. I think you know that yourselves, your family, your friends. But first and foremost, they need confidence. Airlines, passengers, we're eager to ramp up as quickly as possible when it's safe to do so. Booking with confidence obviously means having a visibility on what restrictions will be in place. Will they change? Can they be well understood when people need to book and while they are away? So like right now, as many of us know or have experienced, most member states still have different testing regimes in place, which create an uncoordinated, unworkable, and often distortive patchwork of rules. So a common approach to testing would really go a long way in supporting a sound restart. So A4E, what we've been doing at A4E, we've been calling for this coordinated approach literally since the start of this crisis, so a year ago now. With this anniversary of this very, very difficult year, we still don't have it. Not to mention a common EU passenger locator form. So at the last count, there are 13 different forms in place, and many of them are still in paper format. So we need member states to invest in testing capacity, to provide passengers with rapid and affordable tests, both antigen and saliva, before traveling. And in this context, quarantine should be a measure of last resort. This, of course, for us is extremely important. We also urge member states to adhere to, once and for all, a harmonized traffic light system. Right now, we have 27 different systems in place. Of course, very confusing and does not help us in any way. Passengers do want to travel again, latest by summer, and they're expecting us to work with governments to find a way to make this happen in a safe and coordinated fashion. And of course, we very much welcome the digital green certificate. We've just I've just seen a note that's come by saying that there has been a positive vote at the European Parliament to expedite a decision on the digital green certificate. So this is fantastic. So obviously right now then the ball is now in the court of European Council to make this happen. So this is very, very key. But this, we will do as airlines what is necessary to comply and provide information to get the info required into the digital green certificates. But the overall work, this belongs with the EU governments. And we expect travelers who have already been vaccinated or recovered from the virus to also be exempt from all travel restrictions going forward. So back to you, Jennifer.
We hand things over now to Carlos.
Thank you, Jennifer. Just to, and hello, everybody. To reiterate some of the messages passed by Johan and Ben, and add a few additional ones. Yeah, we at Airlines for Europe, we welcome strongly the legislative proposal for the interoperable digital green certificate system. And like Ben said, important to note, would not only cover vaccination, but also testing or recovery status. And again, like Ben said, we're pretty encouraged that today Parliament has decided to expedite via emergency procedure. We think this is pretty critical for this summer for Europe. I'll just give you two bits of data. One is, again, and this is often forgotten, in Europe, domestic traffic is only 17%. That compares to Asia, 60%, US, 50%. So we have got, you know, a continent that is very interconnected. We like to travel. We need to travel between different countries, and we travel so much more in the summer. Our Q3 levels as Europeans go up 60% compared to the winter, and that is only 8% in Asia and 11% in the US. So again, critical on the digital green certificate to be ready for this summer. We think member states should start working with the Commission to ensure this timely implementation for this summer. Again, very quintessential to us as airlines, you know, to the whole tourism industry, and frankly, especially to all consumers. We do want to stress, like you have in the page there, that the vaccination certificate should not be mandatory in order for people to travel. They should rather better enable travel to happen. So that sort of is an important point. And then again, to touch a bit more, like Ben did, you know, the key thing here is that we avoid this risk of seeing another patchwork of measures, making the whole situation make it a bit more messy for travelers. We think the coordination at European level is absolutely critical. We can think of half a dozen states already, member states, that have announced that they're working in their own solutions. That probably would create more confusion. And last but not least, let me emphasize that, of course, we support, we think it's absolutely critical, the continued speed of national vaccination drives. That actually is, together with coordination, the vaccination levels are going to drive consumer confidence and will determine if people will travel this summer across Europe. Thank you. Back at you, Jennifer.
Great. Now we'll hand things over to Marco Cemperlet from TUI.
Thank you, Jennifer, and good afternoon, everybody. Why is it not just an isolated industry topic? So let's have a look at the facts. A good restart for travel and tourism would support the wider EU economy. As you see here on the slide, specifically over the last 5 years, 1 in 4 new jobs were created by travel and tourism. Travel and tourism, it's responsible for nearly 10% of all employment in Europe, which means up to 37 million jobs. And this is a known fact, it represents quite a huge amount of the EU GDP, which is 9% roughly. So if we want to restore the European economy, let's start with travel and tourism. If we move on to the next slide, and just summarize here what has been said so far, then travel in Europe will be possible this summer. Airlines and tourism companies like TUI have gained a wealth of experience the last year on how to create a safe and responsibly travel during the pandemic for both travelers and our personnel as well. As a reminder, Europe's airlines transported millions of travelers on holiday last summer safely, with a minimal rate of infection. So research from 2020 has shown that just 1 case for every 27 million travelers has been shown up COVID related. For this year, we expect a huge pent-up demand for travel. Demand and bookings are immediately picking up after changes in travel restriction or announcement of reopening plans like we have seen in the UK a couple of weeks ago. People are literally sitting on their suitcases and waiting to travel, as we in German say. Finally, there's no doubt about the level of coordination and preparations that will be needed for a safe and successful restart. The fact is we cannot wait for the pandemic situation to further evolve. Consumers are counting on their governments to make travel possible again. And this is something we as airline are fully prepared to deliver, and we are really looking forward to. Thanks a lot, and back to you, Jennifer.
Thanks to all of our CEOs. I will move into the Q&A portion of the event. We already have a handful of questions that have come in, so feel free to continue to put any questions into the Q&A for our CEOs. Maybe we can start with the first question from Simon Calder. Simon asks, which EU country, in our view, has performed the best in respecting the needs of the aviation industry? and which has performed the worst. So I think we probably won't call out any countries by name here, but I think there's perhaps some good examples with regards to setting countries that have set out a reopening plan for travel and tourism. I don't know. Maybe we can start with Johan. Would you like to take this question?
Well, I think nice try, Simon, but I don't think we're going to try to rate them, on this forum. Look, clearly there's obvious that different countries have to some extent invested different types of amount into the recovery. I think there are studies that show that when you take in the investment as a percentage of the GDP, there's quite a big difference between the European countries, and some of that has clearly gone into aviation. So there is a difference in there, and I think that comes back to partly the structure in terms of the industry in those countries, as an example. So I think it's fair to say though that everybody recognizes clearly the importance of the industry. But one has to recognize that there are, huge competing priorities for a number of governments that they have to deal with and they have to be challenged with. But nevertheless, I think in general that that this has gone beyond what you can expect the industry to deal with it itself. I believe it's absolutely viable and it's necessary that we have and we continue to receive support to be able to frankly provide connectivity that is so desperately needed now as we take us through the phase of the recovery. The damage has been tremendous to the whole of the industry, and its impact is going to last for quite a long time. And I think we were the industry who was hit the hardest at the beginning of this, and it was acknowledged. And we want to make sure now that we're not going to be the industry who comes out the last into this whole thing. And that's why it's so important that we're now getting a roadmap back on how we can restart, because that's ultimately the biggest help we can get, that we are able to start to fly and operate again in a safe way with no restrictions whatsoever in place, if it is not evidently scientifically proven that is there to protect the health of people. But I think we're in a completely different situation right now with the vaccination program being underway in a number of countries, that is really key to unlock these travel restrictions. And by doing so, I still think that there's hope that we can see a good summer coming our way that will allow travel and international flights to take place in a safe way.
Okay, thanks very much, Johan. Of course, if any of the other CEOs want to weigh in, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'd like to move to the next question. The next question is from Itika de Jong. It's a question for Ben Smith. Itika is asking what the Netherlands is planning to quarantine in May, and if you have a view on which restrictions, in your view, which restrictions in order for us to restart by the summer. Thanks.
I think there was a crossing of the lines because I missed part of the question. It cut out. If you could repeat it, please, Jennifer.
Sure. So the question was about the Netherlands introducing quarantine in May, and in your view, which restrictions need to be lifted in order for us to have a proper restart by the summer. So what is your reaction to the Netherlands introducing quarantine in May? Thanks.
Okay, let's try this again. Okay, I got that. Thank you again for repeating that. Look, quarantines in any of the markets obviously cause us a lot of grief and slow down our restart. As we've said many times in the past, we'd like to see a much more coordinated approach to testing, to border controls, to the acceptance of certificates, the acceptance of vaccines across the EU. So, to have one country or two countries have something have something in place that is slightly different. Obviously, it doesn't help us. Now, each country has different has different impacts, is having a different impact from the virus, and obviously that it comes first to ensure that each country is handling the virus as best they can. But in terms of the getting this summer going with all the patchwork of rules that are in place, that's our key. Right now we have a big operation for Air France KLM in Amsterdam, and there is a double testing process in place, which in our view strongly holds us back and makes us less competitive from many other jurisdictions. So I would say, not only is this patchwork of rules about crossing borders causing us problems, but also for connecting customers over our main hubs from outside of Europe, when we have a different set of rules and different hubs, does not help. And what we have in the Netherlands, I know ticket comes from the Netherlands. This is something that we just don't understand and we don't agree with.
Okay. If any of the other CEOs want to weigh in further, just let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question, maybe sticking with you, Ben, or Johan. The question comes from Sid Phillip from Bloomberg. He's asking about the potential for further financial aid to the industry in case the restart doesn't happen. Will there be a need for further financial support? And is this, in our view, something that will be an easy task or not? Maybe Ben, if you want to start on that, on the need for any further state aid.
Look, I think most European, if not all European nations, understand the importance of air travel for the good of each economy. So I think the importance of air travel for the overall transportation infrastructure, how key it is to ensuring that economies get going again, and even during general times, how important this is. And we've seen across Europe good alignment on the need to do that. Obviously, any aid that is put in place for any of the airlines or in any of the jurisdictions should not have an impact on the competitive field going forward. And I think to date that with the European Commission putting a lot of effort on that obviously is under heavy scrutiny. But in terms of additional aid going forward, I think right now the carriers that have good models in their business plans had good models before the crisis should be able to ensure that they can find a way to move forward through different various means of support. Whereas other airlines who may not have or did not have sustainable models will find themselves in a very difficult situation, I would expect, and we've seen a few of those already take place where their futures are either have either ended or are going to be put in a very precarious position.
I think just also Sid, is the fact that we are now completely focused on the restart, and we got now a path on how this can be done, and that's what we've been calling out for right now. I think that the initiative here, which has been extraordinarily welcome in terms of the digital green certificate, is one way of doing that. So I think it's much more now about making sure that we can come together and get the restart going in a safe way with as the minimal amount of restrictions in place, so we don't make it more complicated, more costly for consumers to be able to travel in a safe way. And we believe that is possible to do. That's where the focus is much more right now. And that's what the airlines need. That's what the industry needs. We need to have the ability to start operating again and start flying again, which we do best. That's really the key focus for us.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Johan, for those answers. We'll move on to the next question, which is somewhat related from Lawrence from Reuters. He asks, he says, airlines have been seeking a coordinated approach to COVID travel rules for about a year now. That's right, Lawrence. What specific grounds are there for optimism that this can actually be achieved in the next 3 months? So Johan, maybe we'll start with you. Maybe Marco wants to say something about demand you might be seeing at the TUI side. And of course, Carlos and any of the other CEOs, feel free to weigh in. But maybe Johan first, if you want to start.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've been in this situation now for quite some time, and there's quite a lot of data available, that one can use when you're looking at, the potentially, corridors where you could have, unrestricted travel to take place where it's safe to do so. So we got the data that is available that should really be used, per route to see where it actually makes sense that we're able to fly without any restrictions. Then also remember that there's a number of other tools that is available if there is a need to restrict, some type of and put some measures in place in order to minimize the potential risk of increased spread of the virus, which would, be around testing as an example. You also have the tool of the quarantine, which is, one of the biggest obstacles of why people are not prepared to book. So that should be used as kind of one of the last resorts, I believe. But there's a much, bigger now base of knowledge in terms of, what measures can be introduced. But they have to be introduced in a ways where it's evidently it has an impact and it's needed to do so. I think one of the concerns that we all have at A4E, and we share that really across the sector, is that there will be residues and there will be, measures that are currently introduced and have been introduced for some time that will linger on without actually having any effect whatsoever in terms of the pandemic. One of the key things that happens when you're getting a population in areas that becomes vaccinated is that it relieves pressure on the health systems. And we can see that with, in the UK as an example, where they're starting to become, delinkage now between cases of people, who has COVID and also the hospitalization rates and the death rate. So you can still have people who have the COVID-19, but actually because you have, vaccinated, the elderly and the most vulnerable, it doesn't translate into, any, significant hospitalization or death rate. And I think that the governments have taken, the majority of the governments, I should say, have taken the right approach, that they understand that we have to live with this virus being in here. And we can do so in a safe way because of the success of the vaccination programs that we are now, clearly, are looking for to be rolled out successfully now, really across all of the jurisdictions.
I'll add to that if you want, Jennifer. And I think, I think the question on optimism regarded more coordination. So on coordination, again, just to rejoice, I think, on the role of the Commission very strongly with the digital green certificate. And again, they're pushing that this all goes through emergency procedure, and the passing that we just all rejoiced. And I think Airlines for Europe just put out a statement an hour ago, right, that will go through emergency procedure. That suggests that we have that priority as a continent and as a executive body coordinating Europe, a very high up the mark. I think the other one beyond coordination, the other big reason for, cautious optimism, I would call it, is the vaccination itself. And I'm sure that many of the journalists in the call saw the declarations of Commissioner Thierry Breton on the objective, like the Americans on July 4th, that by July 14th, in this case, more of a French date, we do have a very high percentage of people vaccinated. We do see, I'm sure my colleagues in larger companies, in Easyjet or France or TUI see that, but we see a huge boost. The moment that there is a positive message that you can travel, there is this latent demand very strong. We've actually gone up 350% over the course of a month in the sales rhythm. And it's messages like this. People are literally very tired, right, of not being able to move, not being able either for holidays to visit families. So I think there is, some to the question, causes for optimism on the coordination. At least the Commission is trying to make it a top priority. We were talking to Commissioner Valean before this meeting, and she was very strong and very clear on that message also, that they do everything possible, and then the vaccination plans that need to happen.
And I think to support this message, Carlos and Johan, I think we had a huge uncertainty last autumn. And there's still, of course, a certain level of uncertainty, but we really see that the situation matures in terms of the experience we have, right? So we see that the vaccination rollout makes progress in some countries, or different by country, but it will make progress. Then we see that the government, as Johan said, they take different routes, but I think we see in some, at least, the plans for reopening plans for travel as well. And this is something where governments will learn from each other. Testing protocols is, of course, something what we will push further, as Carlos said as well, in terms of via the EU. And I think that we have seen a lot of different private activities on apps for a kind of digital passports. This is something where now, when the EU is pushing that, then we are quite confident that this will be in place in the mid of summer. And I think this together will form a quite stable fundament that we can be quite optimistic, to be very honest.
Thanks, Marco. We'll move to the next question. It's from Andreas Schultz. He asks about any longer lasting impact that we might expect to see on business travel. So what is the prognosis for business travel? I don't know, Ben, if you want to maybe take this one.
I would say over the last year, we've, from a business traffic perspective, I think depending on the jurisdiction in Europe, personally, I've been more optimistic, talking to some of our biggest customers, that as this crisis and this virus continues, that businesses are realizing the real value of face-to-face meetings, and that conferences like this over video does not fully replace. So I have a view that look, it's going to take a while. We don't have full visibility on what kind of impact it's going to take. Most businesses have been financially impacted negatively by this virus. So discretionary, or not discretionary, but the entertainment and transport costs obviously are usually some of the first to go. But I think we do see a little bit more of a positive trend than we would have seen or would have thought a year ago. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think we still take the position that visiting family and friends traffic, VFR traffic, will return first, followed by vacation traffic, and then business traffic. I think that's everyone's common view.
Okay, great, thanks. We'll move on to the next question, which is a question about current booking trends for summer. So dovetailing into what Ben just mentioned on vacation travel, how do the current booking trends compare to, for example, 2019? So maybe we can start. Marco, maybe you want to say a word about booking levels or booking trends and how you see that at TUI.
I think, as several times mentioned today, we see, of course, still a quite interesting profile. As soon as positive news comes out, then we see a tremendous increase of bookings. And I think this shows that the demand is there. We have, of course, as I said before, some uncertainty when the plans are not provided from the government. But if you compare the booking level in itself, then of course on a shifted profile, giving that there is no certainty, we see quite a good, let's say, a profile in terms of how it develops in a positive way. What we see nevertheless is that the pattern look like that the booking in itself is done closer to the departure date. I think question to my colleagues if they observe something like that as well. But overall, we are really counting on the summer from a TUI point of view. We are still confident that we can provide quite a huge volume, and all the signals we see are quite positive in that regard.
Okay, Carlos or Johan, anything else you want to add?
I'm happy to chip in 2 more bits of data. Just first to reconfirm, I think Marco was seeking confirmation. Yes, definitely very short in. That is something to book in, so very short advance notice. Obviously, I think we're all airlines actually have done. I'm sure we can improve in many things, but I think we're all doing, from what I can see, a very good job in providing a safe environment and also flexibility. People want flexibility, be able to make all changes. I don't want to single out any company, including my own, but I think we're all providing, tons of flexibility. So if there is any change, you don't feel, like in the old days, let's say that a change could be expensive or a change could be, in some cases, forbidden. But I'd add that one, and I'd add also domestic. We definitely see much more, back to the message of coordination across Europe. People feel, at least in Volotea's market, I don't know if our markets are again more France, Italy, Spain, and Greece. And we see much healthier sales rhythm in domestic and international. You can see that people, I think, from surveys and different studies, do want to travel, but there is still the question mark of will be able to. That's why, back to the message again of urgent implementation of the digital travel certificate, that would be huge. I think that would help tremendously. And for sure, what we also think as a last thing is that it'll be more, if the early part of the summer, call it June, is more question mark, I think toward July and August, as a higher percentages of population in all countries, destination or origin, are vaccinated. If we allow, again, people to travel, I do think international will also see an important boost.
Just to add to that and reiterate what Marcus said, I mean, it is extraordinary how the travel sentiment is reacting on the daily news flow. If there are, any positive news or things that can be interpreted as positive news that it is now okay, and the summer, will go ahead from a, international travel point of view, flights, you can see an increasingly surge on the hour. And, likewise, if there are some negative views and headlines, and sometimes the headlines doesn't paint the actual honest picture either, that also affects the bookings. And I think that is really the key thing now to, get that roadmap back to recovery, where we can, restart travel and flights in a safe way, which we now have a roadmap to do.
Maybe just
Thanks, Johan.
one last thing to
Go ahead.
add, if I can, Jennifer. I think travel demand, is driven by a huge pent-up demand to build and maintain relationships. So both for leisure reasons or family reasons, business reasons, relationships, enjoy experiences that in many cases it's air travel is the only way that this could be provided. And I think most of our customers across the world, I believe, have this same sentiment. And what we're seeing, as many of my colleagues have said here, and I'm sure many of the members of the media who are on this call, when you see what's taken place in the United Kingdom, when a firm, clear plan is put out that's communicated, the demand, this huge pent-up demand appears. And I believe we're hopeful that we'll see the same thing here in Europe as quickly as possible, as we start to clear up some of these very cumbersome restrictions that are in place that are not fully aligned and are holding us back in some cases from getting seeing the same type of demand.
Thanks very much, Ben. We have a couple more questions to get through. We'll try to get through as many of these as possible. The next question comes from Lawrence at Reuters. He's asking vouchers. What proportion of the observed pent-up demand do you expect to be covered by vouchers? So maybe
Did we lose Jennifer there?
Looks like.
Yeah, I think we've lost Jennifer.
Right.
Okay.
Let's see if I can try to work out what the question was. I believe the question was what scare vouchers was playing in terms of the refunds. Was that the question, if I understood it right? Yeah, and I think at least from our own perspective, we haven't split it out exactly, you know, the differences and the percentage have been, you know, what has been rebookings, what has been vouchers, and what has been cash refunds. But I think it's just to add to the point that was made earlier, I think Carlos said it as well. I mean, look, the industry is providing more generous policies when it comes to rebookings on flexibility on the cancellations than we ever done before. You know, so it is without a, you know, doubt, you know, a really testament to I think where the industry is trying to get in terms of accommodate, you know, people to have confidence to make a booking and to know that if their plans change because of the restrictions as part of the pandemic, you will also have options to do the same thing with your bookings. And clearly that has been I think an important part as we go through this situation. But make no mistakes, you know, we all airlines has been, you know, having to disappoint customers with changes to their programs. That is not within the control of the airline. It is following basically, you know, the restrictions that are being in place and then sometimes removed, and that causes, you know, great difficulties in terms of how we're operating the programs.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Yes.
Yes,
okay.
we can.
Okay, wonderful. Apologies for that. Next question is from Kathy Buck at Aviation International News. We'll stick with you, Johan. She's asking about the meeting. She said you said you had a good meeting with Commissioner Vouchers this morning. What is the positive news that came out of it, and how realistic are the expectations about the digital Green Pass getting this implemented in a short period of time, given that thus far our calls for a coordinated approach have not. Maybe Johan, do you want to react a bit to the meeting and the discussion with Commissioner Vouchers on this thing?
Yes, I thought it was a very constructive discussion. I mean, Commissioner Vouchers is well briefed on this subject, and she understands these topics, you know, tremendously well. I think that the news on the digital green certificate is really one of the highlights, you know, coming our way, because it actually sets up a framework that is now need to be, you know, contextualized by the different governments in terms of, you know, the data that and the content that needs to be there when it comes to vaccination and testing, and then also recovery. So I think that has been absolutely, you know, key. Then I think it's fair to recognize also that, you know, it is easy to you know, point the finger at the Commission and EU to say, well, we need to have a common approach on this. And I think that they have now delivered this. And now it's really up for the member states to introduce those and to, you know, take this as a common approach and to follow and abide by the framework that now can exist and will exist on this whole thing. So, you know, when you're pointing your finger to say, well, you know, we need more centralized, you know, direction and approach to that. Well, that's now what they have provided. Now it's up to the member states to make sure that they do actually implement this. And we, you know, we clearly agree that the A4E, that we will do our work to make sure that we are, you know, arguing and engaging now, you know, both on the local, national levels with our respective governments, and at the same time keeping in close contact with the Commission on how we continue to you know, gets travel to start in a safe way. Then we also had discussions clearly about, you know, the importance of you know, coming out of this with the Destination 2050 around sustainability, where, you know, the group of the airlines that is represented in A4E has, you know, uniquely come together on this commitment to reach net zero by 2050. There is no other group of airlines in any other continent on the planet that has done so. So, you know, we are providing, you know, leadership in there, and I think that, you know, Europe is also ready to, you know, to take on that leadership, which means that we would need to have support in terms of investment in some of these technologies, but also to help the industry transition into, you know, these technologies that is so exciting and encouraging. So we had a good debate about that. And then clearly also there's a number of things that is, you know, topics that now needs to be resolved. You know, the reformation of the EU 261 as an example, to finally get some clarity about the the rights that consumers have and the obligations that the airlines have. It's a badly worded document that doesn't fulfill its purpose the way it's formatted right now. The modernization of the airspace, the single European sky, that just needs to now be put in place. Only from Easyjet's point of view, we've seen that we can reduce our carbon emissions by up to 15% if that was changed. So, and there's a whole set of theories that we're working together with the Commission on right now that is really important. But the Commissioner is completely understand all of these things, and I believe that they're doing a good work. But it now comes back also to the member states to start, putting some of these recommendations in place.
Thanks, Johan. Maybe just one or two last questions before we close. Staying with you, Johan, the question is from Etika de Jong, and she's asking about the risk of new spreads of the virus as travel would ramp back up, and how do we see the way that we could best manage those risks from an aviation perspective?
Well, just to reiterate also what Marcus said, I think that the industry has proven itself to deal with the different measures in a way that we can safely participate in a way through a controlled framework here without risking additional spreads coming through travel. Now, the key thing to remember here is the vaccination. The vaccination is really key here, because once again, to just repeat what I said earlier, that means that you would need to have to accept that there will be cases of COVID, but they don't result into hospitalization and increased death rates. That is really the key, which means that one has to accept, and that is what most governments are doing, that there will be a situation going forward where the virus and infections will be there, but they don't result in the serious consequences that we've seen in the past, or we also see right now taking place before the rollout of the vaccination is in place. So at the point where you have saturated and where you have had a successful and matured rollout of the vaccination programs for the elderly and the most vulnerable, and a big part of the adult population, well, then the issue about if you're having an infection in people, that is not the big deal. The big deal is to make sure you're protecting the people who are most at risk on this, and that's where you need to track the hospitalization and the death rate. Those are the things that really matters.
Yeah, and obviously coming up with a common EU testing protocol would also help in that regard. If we could finally agree to have a common framework on rapid testing, for example, in Europe, that would also help for sure. Thanks, Johan, and thank you for the question. Maybe one of the last questions. The next is coming from Sid again. He's asking when do we expect governments to say they will allow the resumption of travel? And what do we make of the UK ministers and officials saying that there may not be any overseas travel this summer? I don't know if Marco or any of the other panelists want to weigh in on this. Johan, anyone?
Yeah, I can take it to UK. Marco, do you want to go ahead, please?
Go ahead, Johan, and I add my comment to that.
Okay. Listen, when it comes to UK specifically, there's one thing to watch out for, and that is the global task force recommendation to the Prime Minister on the 12th, or whether that is going to come earlier. That is the only thing that matters. The rest that is out there, it is quite frankly, I think is not that relevant. What matters is actually we're now getting a clarity around what the roadmap will be, and the Prime Minister said that he will take a view on the recommendations that come from the travel task force, and in terms of what ministers individually are saying about booking and not booking. I mean, I could argue to some extent this has never been better time time in the past to make a booking right now, because there are fantastic offers out there. There are very generous policies on cancellations and flexibility to change your booking. But let's leave that aside. most important now to see the roadmap that is expected to come here in the beginning of April. Marco.
Thanks, Johan. Yeah, I just can underscore, especially on the UK topic, this is the same what I would have said. I think just to build a comprehensive picture, I think we see different status, obviously, of the development in each of the countries. And what I stated before, they really monitor each other quite carefully. And of course, you have different situations in each of the countries. I think important is what Johan said already in terms of the rollout of the vaccination. This is really key. I think this can be supported by testing. For instance, in Germany, there are discussions now ongoing. Can we increase even the test? Whilst the vaccination has a little bit a slower ramp up than in other countries, for instance. But I think that each country has even, let's say, a clear view on the demand of the population and the communities that they really want to travel. So this is not by the sake of it. So I think there's even a willingness, you know, to provide, let's say, a clear picture on how to reopen again.
Okay, time for one last question, if we can. The question is from Mara Monti from Italy. She's asking, which countries do you think will recover the fastest? Maybe Marco, we can start with you. Any forecasts on which markets you think will be first to recover?
I think you know, you need to see this in a kind of a swing. I think I would not do a prognosis on, let's say, is this country faster this week or that week, and you know, I think we always come back to this testing protocols, the passport, is it there in July? And I think giving rather a forecast of 6 to 8 weeks, then I think you will see a swing of the countries into the reopening and redemption topic, that they really restart, that we can all restart the operation quite properly. In the end, you need for a flight an origin and a destination, right? So you need to have a combination of it. But if, let's say, a huge amount of the population inhabitants of a country are vaccinated, then of course you have security, and I think this will really evolve quite fast, let's say, within the next month. So I would really hesitate to say, okay, which country here is first. I think from a European point of view, I think this is something what we should overcome in a course or after the next 2 months, in my view.
Okay, one last question for Ben. Itika is asking about the restart and why do we say the summer? I think it's clear for all of us what needs to happen between now and July, but clearly her question is why do we think that we should bet on July, or what is behind that? Then question for you.
Look, we'd like the soonest restart possible. You know, I think what's critical about July is Q3 for the majority of European carriers is the key quarter to make it through the year. So, you know, it's in all of our interests, not just, and all the industries that are attached to air travel, to have a full restart in place by July 1. Obviously, sooner the better. But you know, to not have the ability to have borders open or restrictions coordinated, you know, before then, you know, would be very disappointing.
Well, with that, we're out of time. Thank you to my CEOs for joining today, for all the journalists for your questions, and we'll definitely be back in touch latest by June for our next CEO press conference. And stay well, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.